Welcome to today's Explainer. We're diving straight into the hidden and, frankly, kind of wild gears of global trade. So I want you to picture this for a second. You are the CEO of a major European airline, and you're looking to sell a used Airbus to a buyer in Iran. I mean, it's a European plane. You're located in Europe, so the US has absolutely no business telling you what to do, right? It seems like a simple, totally logical transaction. Well, unfortunately for our hypothetical CEO, that logic crashes almost immediately. Suddenly, the United States Office of Foreign Assets Control enters the chat, and they politely but very firmly let you know that if you go ahead and sell that European plane, they are going to rain down what they describe as a symphony of different problems right onto your head. We're talking about sanctions so incredibly severe that your entire company might actually go completely kaput. It's a shocking roadblock. You have to wonder, how can a foreign government entirely block the sale of a foreign product between two completely different nations? Okay, let's dive into this, because the answer lies in a genuinely bizarre piece of bureaucratic math. You see, in the eyes of the United States government, that European Airbus isn't actually European at all. It's considered an American-made product. And therefore, selling it to a sanctioned nation isn't just frowned upon, it is, quote, illegal, super illegal. To figure out how a plane built in France or Germany suddenly gets this phantom Made in the USA stamp slapped onto it, we really need to look at the unique security framework the US applies to international trade. To understand why the US gets to act like the neighborhood gossip of global aviation, we have to talk about ears. Now, not the ears you're using to listen to me right now, but the Export Administration Regulations. The logic underpinning this whole security system is actually surprisingly simple. If an object is manufactured in the United States and could possibly endanger the US if it falls into the wrong hands, think of things like nuclear materials, high-end supercomputers, or in our case, Boeing 777 passenger jets, the United States asserts legal control over that object forever. It literally does not matter where it is on Earth, and it doesn't matter who currently owns it. This means if a completely independent bank over in Singapore owns a Boeing jet, they still need Daddy Washington's permission to sell that plane to someone the US government doesn't like. Now that makes total sense for a Boeing, right? It's obviously built in America. But here is where this system completely breaks down and turns into what is essentially a massive math disaster. This global regulation doesn't just apply to things that are fully manufactured in Seattle or South Carolina. It also legally applies to things that simply contain American parts, and the magic threshold that the US government has decided upon, just 10%. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is looking at how a plane is actually built. Take a look at this breakdown of an Airbus jet's components. You've got 90% international parts, built by European consortiums and global partners. But if a product contains at least 10% American-made parts, just that tiny little slice you see right there, the entire product is legally considered American-made by the US government. That single 10% slice effectively transforms a massive European engineering marvel into an American asset, at least as far as those export administration regulations are concerned. And here is why that tiny slice matters so much. You see, the global aerospace supply chain is a tightly wound ballet of international parts. It is incredibly interconnected. And because of this beautifully complex global manufacturing system, almost every single wide-body passenger aircraft currently in production around the world, and yeah, that includes all of those supposedly European planes made by Airbus, hits that 10% threshold. They all use American avionics or American wiring or American engine components. Now, this isn't just some abstract legal quirk, right? It has massive real-world cause and effect. Because essentially, every modern wide-body jet falls under this 10% rule. Sanctioned countries are completely boxed out of the global aviation market. Take Iran, for example. For the last 46 years, they've been stuck with a commercial aviation industry that is severely lackluster and increasingly dangerous. And why? Because they literally cannot buy new passenger planes, and they can't even legally purchase basic replacement parts to fix the old ones they already have sitting around. The legal net is just simply too wide. All right, which perfectly sets the stage for our next section, the Boeing 777 heist. Let's move to and see how this builds, because when legitimate modernization is completely blocked by these regulations, airlines in sanctioned countries, like Iran's Mahan Air, are backed into a corner. If they want to keep flying, their only real option is to resort to elaborate workarounds. They're forced to get creative or essentially do crimes. And this is where the logistics get absolutely crazy. Mahan Air recently managed to smuggle not one, but 5 massive Boeing 777s across the globe. Let's trace it. Step 1, the planes were just sitting in a boneyard out in the Australian outback. They were purchased and registered with the FAA as good old American planes by a US-based shell company. Step 2, they get moved over to China.
Step 3, sold again to a company down in Madagascar. Step 4, hidden away in Cambodia. Step 5, they literally ghosted through Afghan airspace. And finally, Step 6, they safely landed in Iran. It's a staggering geographical puzzle.
And the companies actually executing these multi-million-dollar international aircraft purchases, I mean, they are pure theater. The initial US-based shell company that bought the planes out of Australia was called Ion Aviation, and their website was basically one scrolling page of nothingness. Then the planes were sold to Udon Aviation in Madagascar, which is a company that didn't even bother making a logo for themselves. The absolute absurdity of these corporate fronts is just staggering when you consider they are handling massive, highly regulated commercial airplanes. Now you might be wondering, how on earth do you hide 5 enormous commercial jets in plain sight? Well, they utilized something hilariously referred to as the Nutella strategy. By intentionally moving the planes to places like Madagascar and then Cambodia, the smugglers deliberately sought out aviation authorities who had way bigger things to worry about than tracking 5 supposedly missing Boeings. It's basically the aviation equivalent of a kid who shows up to school with an entire jar of Nutella for lunch, purely because his parents aren't paying attention. They just went exactly where the regulatory gaze was at its absolute weakest. Okay, so here's how they pulled off the final getaway, and it's literally straight out of a Hollywood thriller. The smugglers filed an official flight path indicating the planes were flying to Kenya for maintenance. To update their incredibly suspicious paperwork, they just took a pen, crossed out the word April, and scribbled July right over it. Unbelievable. They took off in a convoy, and as soon as they entered Afghanistan's airspace, where, by the way, air traffic control is currently conducted entirely by the Taliban, they simply reached over, turned off their transponders, and vanished from global tracking screens. Minutes later, they popped back up, safely landing on the tarmac in Iran. And here's the kicker. This brilliantly illustrates the most frustrating loophole for the people trying to enforce the 10% rule. When the dust finally settles, there is virtually no one left to punish. Because Udon Aviation in Madagascar isn't actually a real functioning company, the United States can't really sanction it. It's a ghost. And all those other middlemen involved in the earlier steps, they just throw their hands up in the air, look shocked, and claim they were tricked by the buyers. It is an absolute masterclass in plausible deniability. So the crucial point is this. When you enforce a regulatory net as wide and as interconnected as the 10% rule, strict bureaucratic supply chain math inevitably breeds these incredibly elaborate international smuggling operations. This entire heist was a miracle of crazy logistics. It highlights a fascinating reality about global trade. The tighter you squeeze the supply chain legally, the more creative and audacious the black market becomes just to fulfill basic industrial needs.
Which leaves us with a lingering thought to end this explainer. The global aerospace supply chain isn't going to become less interconnected anytime soon, right? If anything, modern manufacturing relies on it more than ever. So as long as this bureaucratic 10% rule continues to declare European planes as American assets, the world's most heavily monitored commercial aircraft will just keep playing a giant, high-stakes game of musical chairs to avoid the U.S. sanctions hammer. The real question is, in this ongoing game of cat and mouse, who is actually winning? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning how the world around us really works.